Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Clayton Tomley, and today I'm going to be giving you a beginner's guide to all 10 teams that compete in Formula One. Formula One, also just called F1, is the highest class of international open-wheel racing sanctioned by the Federazione Internazionale di Automobile, also just called the FIA. The 2024 season consists of 24 races, referred to as Grand Prix, with drivers competing for points. Drivers get points for finishing in positions 1 through 10, with more points being awarded the higher up the order you finish. And this point system is used to compete for two annual championships, the World Drivers' Championship and the World Constructors' Championship. Drivers individually compete for the Drivers' Championship, while teams together compete for the Constructors. As of the 2024 season, there are 10 teams in F1, each consisting of 2 drivers, plus some reserves, but we'll talk about that in a minute. As the 2024 season is already underway, we'll go from top to bottom in the current constructor standings to talk about all the teams. Far and away at the top, we have Red Bull Racing, consisting of the Flying Dutchman Max Verstappen and the Mexican Minister of Defense Sergio Perez. Red Bull have won the last 2 constructors' championships in a row, and early on in the 2024 season, they look poised to win a third. Verstappen is also the 3-time defending drivers' champion and has won both races to start the 2024 season, as well as 34 of the last 43 races over the last 2 years. He's pretty good. Next up, you have Ferrari. They're one of the most historical teams on the grid, and they're led by the hometown boy Charles Leclerc and the Spaniard Carlos Sainz. Now, remember when I mentioned reserve drivers earlier? Teams designate reserve drivers in case of an emergency where one of their drivers can't compete, or if one of their drivers is just terrible and gets fired halfway through the year, the reserve driver comes in and drives for them. Well, Ferrari had to use theirs at the second race of the season. At the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, Carlos Sainz had to have emergency surgery on his appendix and was unable to compete. So in stepped 18-year-old Ali Berman from Formula 2, the lower division of F1. Ali finished 8th on his debut, scoring 4 points for Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. Third in the standings is McLaren, a team led by young talent. 24-year-old Lando Norris and 22-year-old Oscar Piastri make up the papaya team that sits in third. Now, McLaren is one of the oldest teams on the grid and one of the most successful historically, but the past 10 to 15 years have kind of been terrible. They've gone through a plethora of driver changes and not won a lot of races. However, their young core is developing very well, and they're a team to look out for. Sitting in fourth is Mercedes, with the British duo of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell leading them. Hamilton is considered to be the greatest driver of all time, with the most championships, wins, poles, podiums, and a bunch of other stats. However, at the end of the season, he will be leaving Mercedes and replacing Carlos Sainz to drive at Ferrari. Mercedes have had some lackluster seasons after winning 8 straight constructor championships from 2014 to 2021, and this probably led to Hamilton's departure. Mercedes haven't announced who will be replacing him yet. It's probably Max Verstappen, but that's a story for later. But they're looking forward to making the most out of their final season. They have him at the Silver Arrows. The last of the front teams is Aston Martin. I'll explain that in a second too. Consisting of the ageless wonder Fernando Alonso and Canadian driver Lance Stroll. Alonso is in his 21st season of Formula One. Having won 2 drivers' championships, the 42-year-old is honestly still in peak form and currently sits 7th in the drivers' championship. He has carried Aston Martin since arriving in 2023, and this season he already has 92% of his team's total points in the constructors. Lance Stroll is terrible. Now, I mentioned the front of the grid, because this is where we get a huge drop-off. The other 5 teams have a combined 1 point in the first 2 races. 1. The team that has that 1 point is Haas, who are sitting in 6th place thanks to a coordinated effort from drivers Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. At the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, Magnussen committed several acts of on-track terrorism, resulting in a pair of 10-second time penalties that essentially ruined his race. However, he did a big brain. After knowing his race was definitely ruined, he decided to play very defensive, blocking pretty much the entire field behind him, all legally, so that his teammate could drive away into the sunset and finish P10, earning Haas 1 singular point, their first point in 9 races. Now we have the true back of the grid. Leading off the teams with 0 points, we have Williams, probably the most historical team in all of F1. This season, they're led by Alex Albon and Logan Sargent, who is American. Freedom. He's bad, though, and he's probably going to get fired at the end of the season. And Albon will probably move to a different team because Albon is really good and the Williams is really bad. So the future of Williams is 50-50. Next is the Kick Sauber Stake F1 team, and yes, that is their entire name. They're led on track by Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu. Valtteri has been in the sport since 2013 and seems to be past his prime, in my opinion. However, Zhou has improved massively since joining F1 in 2022, and he is a bright spot to look out for the future of Sauber. Speaking of teams with unnecessarily long names, in ninth place is the Visa Cash App Racing Bulls F1 team, which is more words than they are going to score points this season in Formula One. They're led by Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo for the time being. There's a 0% chance both of those drivers are still there at the end of the season. Look out for Liam Lawson, their reserve driver. He'll probably be in a seat by the end of the year. And in dead last is Alpine, who are French, led by Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, who are also French. The Alpine is slower than an actual tractor. Neither one of the drivers has been remotely close to scoring points this season. In fact, thanks to Ollie Berriman, who I mentioned earlier, that ran a race and scored points, Pierre Gasly is sitting in 21st in a 20-driver championship right now. The Alpine is bad. So there you have it. That's a look into all 10 teams in Formula One. So tell me, if you're new to F1, who sounds like the most fun? Which team sounds the most interesting? If you became a fan this year, who would you root for?